Good morning, Darren and Rowan. Welcome.
Hi, Tanya.
Great to have you guys. I would like to introduce Rowan van Dijk from DNL Training and Darren, who's the co-founder of P4P, Passion for Performance. And we're here hanging out in Zoom to chat about digital learning and digital assessment and electronic portfolio management within an outcomes-based assessment environment, which is why we're here today, because I've been pretty much involved in the food bev CETA space as a skills development practitioner for most of my professional career. And I have introduced Rowan to a digital assessment platform, P4P, which he has been very willing to try, and in the true pilot style, carve a footprint for other providers within the food bev CETA space to embark on digital learning options. Now, Rowan, in his professional capacity, has been running DNL training for quite some years. And he's also an exit verifier for the Food Bev CETA and has been part of their panel of exit moderators. And he's an esteemed external moderator. He also provides training across the ETDP scope as well as Food Bev CETA scope qualifications. And I'm here to say congratulations, Rowan, because he has successfully navigated his first external moderation and acceptance of a digital assessment product through Food Bev CETA. So welcome and congratulations.
Thank you.
Darren, maybe if you could just introduce what P4P is about, and then Rowan, maybe you can then discuss why you decided to embark on this pioneering journey.
Cool, thanks, Tanya. So P4P, we are kind of the leading e-assessment and e-portfolio platform. So we focus purely on the assessment process, end-to-end, and digitizing it. So we are working with providers and CETAs where possible to accept the digital transformation of assessment. So not the e-learning or the LXP, but the actual portfolios, the e-assessment, the e-internal moderation and external verification, and then work with providers to transform their current assessment methodology into a digital assessment methodology, because it is quite different. So that's what we do in a nutshell. Rowan, over to you.
Thank you, Darren. Yes, thank you, Tanya. Well, for years I've been involved in verification and external moderation, whatever you want to call it, with the Food Bev CETA. I think it's about 17 years that I've been with them. Been a training provider with DNL that I've had for about 22 years now. And one of the biggest challenges we always faced was the assessment part of it. Because the CETAs and everybody required original handwriting, original signatures, and it was a mission trying to get the stuff sent back and forth, especially if you were training in a different province. So if I was in the Western Cape and I had learners in Joburg, I had to fly people to Joburg. You had to physically be there. You had to try and fit in with their operational schedules. So it's always been a bit of a challenge. And I've, in other endeavors that I'm busy with, been involved in the online space and always wondered why we could never go that route. And when I was introduced to P4P, I thought, here's an opportunity. But also as a verifier, I spoke to the Food Bev CETA and I said to them, here's a way forward. Here's a solution going forward for assessments and offsite assessments. Can't we, investigate this? And they gave me the go-ahead to pilot the process. So it's a two-pronged approach. It's from my perspective as a training provider transitioning to digital. And then it's also at the same time getting the CETAs to accept the new technology and to accept that digital assessments and digital learning is actually the way forward, and it does work. And it's, as I said, it's been a transition period. It's been a while because we've had numerous calls back and forth, numerous onboarding sessions with Darren. We're running a group at the moment where we've had continuous contact, and Darren's call center has weekly contact with the people. So there's been a lot of engagement, and it's, I'm still learning the process, but at least we are moving forward, and I think it's the way to go. And from what I've experienced so far, to me, this is it.
That's fantastic, Rowan. Darren, what do you find in your experience of some of the challenges that traditional SAQA providers are faced with? And you've dealt with many SETAs, FoodBev not being the first. What are some of the pitfalls that you can suggest to providers to avoid?
So I think, Tanya, one of the biggest challenges is the portfolio of evidence, the current way it's done. And most of the providers that we've worked with, they kind of have a formative and a summative assessment that's all knowledge-based. So it's all, answered, the outcome might be demonstrate the skill, and they'll then have, so how would you demonstrate the skill? That's question 42 in the summative assessment guide. And it doesn't lean a lot towards actual applied competence, but more knowledge-based. And when you move into the EPOE space, which is now allowing for more skills-based, demonstration, it's a little bit challenging because it's a mind shift in, okay, my portfolio of evidence, actual process needs to shift. I can move away from handwritten to video-driven, video the person doing the work. So that's the one. And the other biggest challenge is there's such a big drive to digitally onboard your learners. Make sure you have good digital onboarding for your learners. Make sure you teach your learners. Everyone's forgotten about the assessor, the administrator, facilitator, SETA, and all the other bodies that are involved in the digital ecosystem. What about them? So we have a lot of troubles with the assessors who are so afraid of the technology, they might get something wrong, they might do it wrong, that they kind of slow the processes down. So I think what I really enjoyed with DNL, with Rowan, is that he has not been shy to go, thanks for this session, can we have another one? Thanks for this one, can we have another one? Because it's that learning, it's that consistent engagement with the technology and the technologists that, we who design it, that enable it to go smoother and smoother through the process. So those are the two key things. One, the actual assessments, tools, and two, the entire ecosystem of stakeholders, not just the learners.
Fantastic. I think what has sparked my interest and my experience with P4P is the fact that there's an ownership in terms of what learners and assessors are all contributing towards building. But what then happens is that the learner takes that away with them, and they keep that evidence in a digital backpack, in that ecosystem that you've created, and it becomes theirs. Because as an employer, when I've embarked on learnerships, and as a provider, when I've helped employers implement learnerships, that evidence that learner generates, sits in the closet at the provider's offices, or sits in some storage locker at the employer's premises, and that learner never ever has access to any of that information again. So for me, I think one of the great points, just in terms of being able to store but share and access that information at any given point in time, is a fantastic opportunity for learners to hang on to that and use it for job interviews that they might go on in the future, etc. But as a provider, it cuts out all that administration and all of that backwards and forwards with files and carrying, moderators coming in to sit with files or sending files to moderators, and similarly assessors. So that's a huge plus point in my books.
Yes, if I can just add to that what Darren said earlier. In one of the SACWA regulations, it specifies that the method of delivery is not as important as achieving the outcome, which has always told me, and that is what you mentioned, I work in the ETDP space, so I train assessors, moderators, designers. What I've always tried to teach them is that although the training is important, although it's important getting the message across, doing the transfer of knowledge, the crucial part is making sure that they actually learn something. And that's where the assessment comes in. So with all the e-learning platforms, the LXPs, or the terminology that's out there, it's all focused on the delivery. P4P is the only platform that I'm aware of that solely focuses on the actual evaluation and the assessment to make sure, did the learning actually take place? But the beauty of it is that, as you mentioned, Tanya, you don't have files and rooms full of files. I mean, I've had experiences over the past 17 years where I go do exit moderation at a provider, and they've done learnerships on about 200-300 learners, or they've batched a lot together. Yeah, it looks like a storage facility when you get there, and you've got to try and pull these files and then look for the files, and then this is in there. And I've done verifications on providers where the assessor thought that the best option is stuff everything into the file and let the moderator decide what's important and what's not important. And you have these files full of unnecessary stuff. The one provider where for a level 2 qualification, I got 2 of those typec boxes with a paper full, including leave applications, everything. So what's nice about P4P, and what I've realized as well, and that's for me the pilot, is that I was also unaware of exactly how the process works. So once we started diving into the process, I realized that I need to now, for the next round, go forward and redesign my assessments, because I don't need all that unnecessary paper and all that unnecessary stuff where I had to prove to the CETA that it was original handwritings and authenticity. I can now do it a lot easier. And also, as Darren said, we can now move away from just simply testing the knowledge and focusing so much on the knowledge, and actually going to, can you actually demonstrate it? Can you make a cup of coffee? Fine, the 10 steps to making a cup of coffee, but show me how you make a cup of coffee. And I think that's the important thing. And for me, it's still a learning process. Unfortunately, Darren, I'm one of those people that I want to know how things work, so I'm going to ask you every 5 minutes until I understand. But as well as also for me, it was not just from a provider perspective, it was a dual approach. So I was looking at it from a provider, how it works for me as a provider, but I was also looking at, would this fit into the quality assurance mechanisms of the CETA, and would there be a chance of the CETA approving it? That was sort of my biggest approach.
So, and I think it's very important that, just to put in that, Rowan didn't verify his own stuff. We were working with other there was 3 other verifiers so Rowan was one of 3. There were 3 others in the pilot, and that's a very important point to make. 4 in total.
One of 4. There were 3 others with myself. So
yeah.
Yes. Okay. I just want to pick up on that storage, Tanya, if you don't mind, especially with POPI, as they're not kicking in. So obviously, as a technological provider, my partner is very involved in the GDRP space. So he's part of a fintech company in Europe. And one thing about storing portfolios now POPI requires is that if you store something in a Jojo hut or in a storeroom, the POPI Act now requires that 1, who can access that storeroom, 2, who does access the storeroom, 3, what's in the storeroom. So every time you put a in, you have to capture somewhere what portfolio, who did it belong to, what was in it in that storeroom, and you got to make sure the storeroom can't burn down. And if it does burn down, what do you do in order to mitigate what's in there? So POPI is now demanding this. So, I mean, I've worked with providers who have 3, 4, 5,000 portfolio folders over the past 3 or 4 years in a room. That's no longer acceptable by POPI. You now have to go and you have to, if you haven't, you have to go and, contextualize every one of those portfolios and lock the storeroom, know who's got the keys, sign the key in, sign the key out, etc., etc. And this is, Tanya, part of the reason why we looked at P4P. Even this was before Ozzy, my partner, was clearly driving towards this process, because everything in P4P is mapped. So we know your e-portfolio for the learner, but we know who can access it, who may access it, when they access it, how it was accessed, what was accessed, and also when the learner signs into P4P, they sign a declaration that they acknowledge that we will be storing their evidence for them. And at any point in time when they want to delete it, they can ask us to delete it. Obviously, it has impact, but the whole POPI scenario is now, the learner owns their, the compliance of their portfolios and their information. So I think that doesn't pick up on that. Thanks, Tanya.
No, that's a great point. I mean, those learners would never have had the opportunity to, have access to any information in those portfolios. But I think another fantastic point that supports outcomes-based learning and, that one-on-one aspect of coaching and feedback to the learners is the communication between assessor and learner, in that there's a digital map, a digital footprint of every aspect of that communication. Obviously, in terms of the way that the assessment criteria are set up in the system, at every checkpoint or AC of the specific outcome that you've mapped onto the system, the assessor and the learner have an opportunity to rate each other or rate their evidence that they've submitted, and then provide comments. That from a trail of communication perspective, I think is going to blow a lot of moderators' minds when they actually see the potential of that, because previously, it's quite subjective and quite laughable, some of the documentation that I'm sure Rowan has experienced as an exit verifier, that proves this little piece of paper means that the learner and the assessor had interactions. But this is constant interactions at every assessment criteria of the portfolio that is being built. And the assessor can't hide away from it. The learner can't hide away from it. And it's there for the moderator to review and confirm that there's sufficient coaching and feedback opportunities built into the system. Whereas just the limitless little one pager that most providers use as evidence of coaching and feedback meetings, and I'm sure Rowan can agree that there's been some shock horror stories, but your learners and your assessors and your moderators, it's all available in the platform, which is fantastic.
Yeah, for me, talking about that, okay, firstly, 2 examples. I want to go back to what Darren was saying about storage and the rest of it. Yeah, one of the biggest plus points of P4P for me, well, not just P4P, but I mean, they are the pioneers, but the e-portfolio process is that, to give an example, currently I'm sitting in Namibia. I am doing online training with a group of learners in Johannesburg, and my moderator is sitting in Cape Town. Now, you can imagine the logistics of trying to move this paper around 2 different countries to get it assessed, get it moderated, get it back into storage, and make sure nothing gets lost. I have a situation currently with previous people that I've trained that after a year and a half, they've now asked for moderation. I have the stuff in storage in Cape Town, so I had to get somebody to go get it out of storage, get a courier to the moderator. It becomes a joke. P4P, you can access it via internet anywhere. So that is one of the major breakthroughs for me. Coming back to what you were talking now about the assessor, one thing I've noticed with the P4P platform is that, as you said, I can tell you lots of horror stories about whether you can figure out whether the assessor actually interacted with the learner or not. I've seen observation checklists where the assessor was never even in the workplace. The learner actually doesn't even know who the assessor is or what they look like. What's happened with the P4P is it's designed in such a way that at every step you can check whether the assessor has actually interacted with the evidence. You can see whether they are assessing properly. That is, for me, one of the big things. And then obviously, as I said, the remote access from anywhere where you can moderate, assess, verify, anybody can get in there. And then the fact that it's tracked, it's date stamped, you know exactly who was in there, when they were in there, what time they were in there, and as Darren said, what they were doing there. And I think that just makes the whole assessment process and the quality assurance process, we are now assuring that it is actually quality.
Thanks, Rowan. Just in closing then, Darren, any final remarks that you'd like to add? And Rowan, then yourself, back at you.
So I just want to thank Rowan and DNL because training providers are very skeptical around anything digital at the moment. So when you get a provider like DNL who goes, okay, I'll do this. Let's do this. Let's see how it works. It's really exciting because then we can obviously learn. You know, our goal is to learn from you and then build what you need. And I've really experienced that with Rowan, and I've had some really good feedback. So thank you, Rowan. And I think I'm really excited about where DNL is going because we can really increase the footprint now on your programs. People can really start connecting in, you know, from wherever they're working. And yeah, I think we can really assist the seaters here. I think we can finally bring the seaters something rather than a complaint. You know, it's so easy to tell the seaters what they're doing wrong. But it's nice to be able to go to teachers and go, hey, it's irrelevant what you're doing. We want to support you. Does this work for you? So I thank you for that. And yeah, I'm excited about where DNL is going and what we're going to achieve together.
Fantastic. Rowan, any final?
Rowan, what do you think?
Okay, so firstly, what I just want to say for me is that, you know, I get emails, I get people contacting me on a daily basis, all about e-learning and e-learning platforms and this. And what you realize when you talk to these people is that they are people who understand technology, who want to help you with quality assurance and assessment. The difference with P4P is from the first day that I started speaking to Darren, I immediately realized that he understands the entire quality assurance process. He understands assessment. He understands how it works. And he so happens to also know technology to help you to do it. And that for me is the important thing, is that P4P puts something together for you, designs a process for you, loads your stuff, not trying to tell you how to do it, but they take your stuff and they go digital with it. But they actually understand what's required. And I think that's the reason why we passed our verification with FoodWebSeeker. The process has been approved for the induction moderation that we had with FoodWebSeeker. And as you mentioned, there were 3 other FoodWeb external moderators on it. And I know that one of them was there actually being inquisitive to see how the process works. So yeah, we now have 4 people that are moderators, but are also providers that can now drive this and take it forward and get FoodWeb to accept this as a way forward. So from my side, in Darren, even Tanya, with the work that you guys did, thanks to P4P. It's
thank you.
I know that a lot of times we say this is years too late, but years back we didn't have this, and I don't think that the seaters were ready for it. So there's a number of circumstances that have happened that have made that the seaters are now more aware and more acceptable of digital portfolios and the rest of it. And I think this is the way forward. And I am super excited to be involved with P4P. So thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks, Rowan.
Until we meet again on the next phase of your journey, Darren.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Tanya. And thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.